October the 26th, 1917. The coming of a dawn, a most desolate scene. The entire expanse of the countryside in all directions is one broken waste, unspeakably dreary and barren. Shell hole merged into shell hole, as water made it impossible at any point. Fritz shelled this area almost incessantly, and our artillery does so like measure. 9 months in France and Belgium completed. Donald MacPherson. 3 years of stalemate on the Western Front, 3 years of blood, 3 years of rain, 3 years of mud, 3 years of tunneling under the Germans to blow them up with TNT. The mines were set off at Messine Ridge, creating a large explosion, maybe the largest explosion in human history, with no nuclear force or pre-World War II, so it was all done by hand on the ground. Thousands instantly killed, some buried alive, others limped away with limbs missing, and heat from the explosion itself caused burning, even in the rear of the trench. Men bursting into flames and their screams littered the battlefield. The infamous Sir Douglas Haig said we were going to break through in Flanders and win this war. He was wrong. In the course of just 5 months, 250,000 Allied, mostly British, Canadian, South African, white and black, Indian Raj troops, Newfoundlanders, even some Scottish were killed or wounded and injured in this attack, and it was mindless slaughter. Even though the battle began July the 31st, the main meat of this story comes 2 months later. Near October, a runner arrives giving the Canadian general his orders. His Canadian men were to take over the Stall offensive in Flanders, Passchendaele. Let them have it. The mud isn't worth a drop of blood. Sir Arthur Currie, said Sir Arthur Currie himself. He was an unlikely hero, a real estate speculator in Vancouver before the war had broke out, but his leadership skills and care for his men was the key in capturing Vimy Ridge last month. But Passchendaele thus far wasn't going well in Currie's eyes, but he could not disobey Sir Douglas Haig's orders. So what was he going to do? Well, you see, Haig himself was in trouble for being fired, almost being fired himself, with the disastrous Somme and basically 2 years of getting nowhere after 1915, his promotion in 1915. Haig was basically on the lines of being fired. So his saving grace, he thought, Passchendaele in Flanders itself was a bulge sticking into German-held Belgium at the time. It stood strong since 1914, but at a cost of 1,000 men a day, because Germany had the whole salient, the whole of Belgium. This was just a little pocket. It was literally in the middle of the whole of occupied Belgium. Well, the salient was in the middle and the end by the coast. But Haig was sure Flanders was the victory he desperately needed. Lloyd George and the other British public were growing a bit weary of the war. 3 years, 3 million British/Empire troops. 1917 was the unofficial year of mutinies. The Bolsheviks in Russia, mutiny in the French army, even the Central Powers in the Reichstag and in Istanbul. Even in Austria-Hungary was starting to break down, but it affected the Allies most of all. In single file, we advanced to the ridge of fire. A path was a crater-torn landscape. We passed burnt-out vehicles and equipment. The rain of artillery fire continues to pour down on the dead, refusing them to rest in peace. By Karl Wingenwaber. So with the artillery, the Germans responded with chlorine gas. Their new deadly weapon of mustard gas. It was a heavy gas that burned the eyes, irritated the flesh. Even after the so-called fumes were gone, it still sucked into the ground. If any man was to fall in that mud, their skin would be torn to shreds by the gas hidden in the mud, making this gas lethal for months and not even seen. Despite this, they went over the top on July the 31st, 1917. But then, as they marched across the fields, it began to rain. Plus, there was the flooding of the salient by King Albert, making it into a deadly quagmire, and the Germans saw it coming. There was no shelter. It was only flat, muddy battlefields, a double horror of being cut down by the MGs and drowning in the earth. So next he sent up the Anzac Corps to take over from the British. They did a little better, gaining a little more ground, but in the face of MGs and their riflemen defending, they lost over 60% of their men. Passchendaele was his biggest boast. If he didn't deliver soon, he could lose his command. That's when the orders for Byng's army came, where the story all started with Arthur Currie. He refused, and Haig personally came to see Arthur Currie himself at Canadian HQ. He told Currie it was necessary to do this, to push forward and to take these objectives. We know in the back of our minds his selfish goals of not being fired and to make himself look like a war hero. Haig is a very controversial man indeed. He's good and bad, but Passchendaele was his most selfish, try to not get fired moment yet. He convinced Currie of the plan, but Currie had the upper hand with negotiations. Currie had the upper hand in negotiations in a sense. He could tell Haig when he wanted to attack, where he was going to attack, the plan itself of attack, and how much guns he really needed. So we're in October 1917. The Canadians began their slow march into hell. They marched into Belgium, where they saw crosses piled up alongside the road for the graves to come. Currie was near the front in a 2-story shack. He always wanted to be close to the men. He always wanted to know that the men were going to have the best chance of survival. He was up there all the time. The mud of Passchendaele was more or less a swamp. Passchendaele itself was more or less a swamp in medieval times, and then they drained it out, but thanks to the infamous King Albert I and a lot of artillery from both German and British and French sides, they kind of destroyed the piping, so it was always going to be this quagmire, this muddy, oozy, mud-filled battlefield. And the year of 1917, well, a lot of things happened in 1917. It was the year of rain as well. A lot of rain happened during this battle. To prepare for his Canadian engineers, he actually made them build some plank roads, and they were called duck boards. They were like mini ladders for a sense. It was like a mini pathway for men to walk on, because if you ever fell into the mud, you had like 90 pounds of equipment on your back, so if you ever fell into the mud itself, that was basically a death sentence. If you were injured in the leg or even the arm, that was basically a death sentence as well. The mud was so thick, but at the same time it was like porridge. It had the consistency of porridge in a sense. You could drown in porridge or soup, so you could drown in mud. So of course, this is basically a Vimy Ridge scenario. He obviously let his men rehearse the attack multiple times. He let the artillery spot and do its job, preliminary bombardments. He also decentralized command, making the, like German stormtroopers in a sense, making the company NCO commander take the lead, so he would not have to cause mindless slaughter like the Somme, so he allowed small flanking teams. They would, the plan was very simple, almost like Vimy Ridge, as I said. The artillery, however, was the problem. Unlike Vimy Ridge, the Flanders, we're going to go over this a while, but the Flanders battlefield was porridge, like mud everywhere. You could not pull these artillery guns anywhere in this mud, and Sir Douglas Haig actually did not promise the artillery that Currie wanted. So Currie went to high command himself. He actually dropped a few F-bombs, and he got the artillery he needed, because Haig submitted. Haig needed this Passchendaele. Haig needed Passchendaele to go properly, or he was done for. So we meet Karl again, and the Germans, of course, have the high ground in most of these salients. So the Germans could see what the Allies were actually doing. They could see they were preparing for a major attack. So this is what he had to say. The company leader's eyes fell on me. Question. I'm already up with my steel helmet quickly. I knew I had to do this. As I prepared for my dangerous errand, my mind already traced the steps I must pass through the suffering. It's always the same, a life and death lottery. Curry's plans this time around was to attack in a step formation, similar to Vimy Ridge, but a much tighter and much reinforced, much quicker attack. He wanted a two-prong attack to go north of Bellevue and the other to go south of the Passchendaele Ridge. The first attack was to happen on the 26th of October, but the Canadians did not know that they were actually walking into a German trap on the first day. 5:40 a.m. the 26th of October. Curry gave his orders for his men to go over the top. They clawed out of their shell hole to the German line. It was both raining, water and shells. The only protection they had was a creeping barrage. It worked at Vimy, so the Canadians hoped it would work here. They slowly inched up to the German line. They utterly stopped. As they rushed forward to the abandoned German-French line, the Germans had abandoned the line and ranged their artillery to perfect accuracy to rain down on the Canadians. Deadly accurate. And the Germans started the counter-attack. They were cut open. The 3rd Canadian Army took massive losses. Men with major and minor wounds were buried alive by the sea of mud, drowning in a pace of earth, unable to move, but the Canadians had held strong, and they remembered what Curry taught them. As they knocked out the German pillboxes and took the ridge, the Bellevue Heights, but at a cost of over 70% of men. Captain David, the unit's padre, tied a white cloth to his walking stick, as he helped most friend and foe in no man's land, as the other Canadians rushed to help him, and a few brave Germans as well also got their wounded. As some guns went quiet, it was a live and let live, a truce for 30 minutes as the wounded went back to their trench. And it was a miracle, almost like the 25th, 1914. But this was, however, short last, as some guns went off in the background, and they knew it was time to go back, as he nodded and went back. As quickly as it started, it ended. The Canadians have gotten the high ground. Curry wanted this. Curry wanted his Canadians to be in striking distance. They were successful. While one was 300 millimeters and the other one gained 900 millimeters, they were still in striking distance for the 3rd and final phase. It was about to begin. It was already a cost of 200 plus casualties, and it was going to strike the heart of the German defense. The Canadians now had a better view of their objectives, but the Germans were reinforcing Passchendaele. It had to be held at all cost. The order goes out to the Canadians. They rush through the yellow and brown mud to the German defensive. The Prairie Boys, as they were called, pushed their way into Passchendaele, the village. The urban combat was vicious. Bayonets, clubs, shovels, blunt tools. Karl and his Germans were fighting, but after this they were forced to retreat. The Winnebagoes took the town, or what was left of it. Curry had his prize, and it was in Canadian hands. But it was a grim feeling of being the only one left of your team, of your company. But the Canadians did have the high ground, and they saw, for the first time in years, green grass. Even the sun, birds were singing. It was basically a repeat of Vimy Ridge, and they really desperately needed it in the end. But Haig wasn't satisfied, as Haig wanted all of the Germans out of that salient, which cost another 1,000 plus casualties. But a rare thing happened that day. Haig saw past his own arrogance and saw he couldn't push to the coast in 1917. So he did the most reasonable thing. He called it off. Curry handed over Passchendaele to the British, as the Allied soldiers said the Canadians looked like ghosts, in blood and mud. They had nothing to say. Words could not describe the fight for Passchendaele. We heard from Karl Binger-Raffer one more time. He was in the 1918 German Spring Offensive. Who knows if he made another life. Sadly, the man that I mentioned in the beginning, Macpherson, he had a brother, and his name was Ross, and he was fighting at the Battle of Amiens. Donald was fighting at Amiens when a shell went off next to him. He went into the hospital, and later that day, Ross Macpherson was killed. There was a huge gap in his diary due to the death of his brother, but he wrote this as a triumph. He couldn't let the death of his brother hold him back. It was what he wanted him to do. I look back over these dark days and nights since the passing of Ross' death. I seem to be living in an entirely different world, a dreary place, where nothing matters anymore. And may God grant us the courage and spirit to carry on, as Ross would have us do. He was sent home, and later got his dream job as a teacher in Toronto. At the peace talks, Haig told the reason, but Curry, like us, opened his eyes and actually saw what the reason was. It was a fight for nothing. He quietly nodded his head and walked away. He later became the principal of a school that I can't remember off the top of my head. And like the Somme, Vimy Ridge, Verdun, even as far as Gallipoli, it was World War I in a nutshell. Futile, a waste of life. World War I, a senseless horror on the Western, Eastern, Middle Eastern, Balkan, Adriatic, and even in the Balkans. Every year, the people of Flanders, the whole of Belgium, played the last post and let the Canadians, the British, the French, even their own Belgians, rest in peace. As a side note, I forgot to mention Harold Lewis, because I would link the documentary in the description, as I always do, but I forgot to say that Harold Lewis was from Vancouver, BC. He worked in the 2nd Vancouver, BC tunnelers of the First World War. He actually was one of the many men to set off the explosions at Messines Ridge. But the special thing about him was that he was one of many Empire soldiers that lied about their age and were sent off. He later got some injuries from a street battle in Passchendaele, or somewhere near Passchendaele Ridge, and he was subsequently carried to the hospital where a doctor actually found out that he was a 16-year-old going on 17-year-old boy, where he was shipped back to Canada, BC. So Harold Lewis was actually one of the last surviving Passchendaele veterans of the First World War. I've watched the documentary. I could say it's a 2005-2006. He died at 102 years old. So today may have been his 110th, 111th birthday. God bless you, Harold Lewis. Harold Lewis. God bless. If you want to help me in this series, you could. I do centennials every time they come up. It's a weekly process. While I do my weekly videos, a centennial is a bit harder to do, since it is basically in a centennial, it's once in a lifetime thing. So I may go and do some centennials from 1914 with the Russians and other countries, but we'll just work our way up to 1918, and then if anything we could backtrack, because by then we'll have the Russians, we'll have the Balkans, probably the Italians as well. So we'll probably do major centennial battles, but that's pretty much it. So I'm going to edit this. I think this was maybe one of my grimmest episodes yet, but I think I really put a lot of passion into this Passchendaele project, if you mind the pun. So I think that's going to be pretty much it. Tell me if you like the kind of darker tone. Obviously centennials really have to get that nudge, because I could always redo a weekly episode, but a centennial is forever, so all the centennials will be staying up on my channel. So of course I try and get a lot of people's feedback and research before I do these centennials. That's why they kind of take so long, so that's why they mostly come out like 100 out of 100. Yeah, I finally grade my work with some decency. I always say, man, my work is like a 7 out of 10 or something, but a centennial is always 100 out of 100, 10 out of 10. So if you like the darker tone, like it. If you don't like it, well, I will try and tone it back for Bar Longwoods and the Musagon Offensive and other stuff like that. So Passchendaele is just one of those very dark, senseless, futile slaughterhouses. So of course it's going to be a dark one. I mean, war isn't rainbow and sunshines. We're not shooting each other with water pistols here, but it was one of those futile battles of the First World War. So this video is already 20 minutes, and I'm already adding on like 5 minutes to the video. So if you could watch through 30 minutes, if you get to the end, you are a legend. You are amazing. This is like a mini documentary. So thanks for everyone's help. Dragoon, the Great War, World War I, World War II group I was in. If Dani actually didn't post about Passchendaele, I would have never actually gone and saw, wow, Passchendaele's on July the 31st. So you got to thank her for that. Also thank Dragon from KUK, Cook, for trying to help me edit. He didn't actually edit, but he was going to, so thank him for that. And thank for all the CUC and Flood and Discord feedback. I really appreciate that, because there's going to be friends that say your content's great, it's nice, and it is good, but we want to get to the level where it's like on par with a History Discovery Network kind of documentary without $10,000 being put into it. So I would like to thank everyone who said it was nice, and people who gave me good feedback, and I'd like to thank all of you. So if you want to give me more feedback, I'm basically here. It's more of a personal thing, so you already know who I am. So if you want to give me feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, almost 2,000 channel views, not bad. A long way from 1 million channel views by the end of the year, but that would be something. Anyway, this is the Emo Syndicate. I hope you learned something, and I hope you really respect the people who died for the rights and privileges you have today. So I hope you learned something. There's going to be Dunkirk. I have not done Dunkirk, but don't worry, that will be sometime soon. If this all goes well, I might actually redo all of the French series in this. Very enthusiastic, because people say I don't really sound too enthusiastic, so I would, for the whole of next week, I will try and redo the French. But anyway, this is already 30 minutes of watching already, so I don't even know if you'll make it to the end, but hope you learned something. I'm gonna put links for all the people, documentary, everything, even a good read if you want to, and that's pretty much it. So hope you learned something, and God bless. See you later.